June 1880, deep in the Australian bush. In pouring rain, 50 officers pour rifle fire into the darkness. Out of the trees steps a figure. The figure is wearing an iron helmet and breastplate. At 90 pounds, the crude metal shell absorbs the incoming crossfire, leaving the man inside completely unharmed by the barrage. This is Ned Kelly. Over a century later, his name still splits public opinion. To some, the man inside this suit is a righteous champion of the poor who stood up to a corrupt state. To others, he is a calculated, ruthless murderer. Finding the truth requires stripping away the romanticized Australian folklore. We have to look past the myth and examine the forensic, chronological timeline of how a petty stock thief escalated into an armed extremist. In 1870s Victoria, poor Irish Catholic immigrants, known as selectors, formed a heavily marginalized underclass. They lived in systemic poverty and faced frequent harassment from a predominantly British-led police force. The breaking point for the Kelly family arrived in April 1878. A drunken police constable named Alexander Fitzpatrick rode into the Kelly homestead and made unwanted advances toward Ned's younger sister. The encounter quickly exploded into a violent brawl. The state's retaliation was incredibly severe. Even though Ned and his brother Dan were the primary targets, Judge Redmond Barry sentenced their mother, Ellen, to a harsh 3 years of hard labor for her role in the scuffle. Faced with an aggressively biased justice system and warrants for their own arrest, Ned and Dan fled into the dense timber of the Wombat Ranges. The imprisonment of a mother with 8 children was an astonishingly harsh punishment. For Kelly, it was the psychological catalyst. The state's action turned a local criminal into a man with a deep, violent vendetta. In October 1878, Kelly crossed a line he could never return from. Tracking a police search party to Stringy Bark Creek, Kelly and his gang ambushed the camp, shooting and killing 3 officers. The Victorian government immediately declared the gang outlaws and placed a massive 500-pound dead or alive reward on their heads. Now hunted men, the gang shifted tactics with high-profile armed raids on banks in Euroa and Jerilderie. Inside the vaults, Kelly systematically gathered the town's mortgage documents and bank books and threw them into the fire. By erasing the crippling financial debts of the local poor, Kelly secured instant loyalty. The people he freed from financial ruin became a silent network of sympathizers, making the gang nearly impossible to track. This was a calculated insurgency. Kelly transitioned from simple theft to a campaign of weaponized class grievances, paying for an army of supporters who would hide his gang and feed them supplies. We know exactly what Kelly was thinking during this time because he wrote it down. During the Jerilderie bank raid, Kelly delivered an 8,000-word, unpunctuated manifesto dictated to gang member Joe Byrne. In the document, Kelly tries to justify the police murders at Stringy Bark as strict self-defense. He frames his entire criminal campaign as a righteous struggle against what he calls the tyrannism of the English yoke. The text rapidly escalates into violent, explicit threats against the state. Kelly vows that if his demands are ignored, he will unleash a vengeance worse than the rust in the wheat or the dearth of a dry season. Reading the manifesto today reveals a man who had entirely abandoned basic survival tactics. Kelly was now operating under the delusion that he was a divine avenger, fully intending to spark a widespread colonial rebellion. By June 1880, that delusion materialized into a catastrophic terror plot. Kelly planned to sabotage the railway tracks at Glenrowan, derail a special police train, and massacre any officers who survived the crash. To prepare for the slaughter, the gang forged bulletproof suits out of thick metal farmers' plowshares. Weighing roughly 90 pounds, the crude iron armor was designed to turn the men into unstoppable executioners in the aftermath of the wreck. But the plot collapsed. A local school teacher taken hostage by the gang managed to escape and flag down the approaching train. The train screeched to a halt in the dark, and the planned ambush instantly turned into a massive, protracted police siege at the Glenrowan Inn. In the final firefight, Kelly's armor did exactly what it was built to do. It stopped dozens of bullets from piercing his chest and head. But the police soon realized his legs were completely exposed and shot him down into the mud. The heavy iron suit that Kelly believed would make him an invincible revolutionary was the exact thing that destroyed his mobility and ensured his capture. Kelly survived his gunshot wounds, only to be transported to Melbourne to stand trial. In a grim twist of fate, he was sentenced to hang by Judge Redmond Barry, the same magistrate who had imprisoned his mother years earlier. In November 1880, Kelly was led to the gallows at Old Melbourne Jail. Facing the rope, observers reported his resigned final words, "Such is life." His execution did nothing to settle the debate. We are left with a sharp cognitive dissonance, the forensic reality of a domestic terrorist who planned a mass execution, sitting alongside the enduring cultural myth of an anti-establishment folk hero. You have to weigh the brutal, systemic corruption he fought against, the horrific, calculated murders he committed. Was Ned Kelly a product of a broken system, or just a ruthless killer? Let us know your verdict in the comments below.